A government lawsuit alleges this island was the base of one of the most disturbing trafficking operations tied to a single man. A turquoise water, private dock, a helicopter pad, reachable only by boat or by air. The U.S. Virgin Islands took him and his estate to court, claimed the abuse didn't stop for years. This is what that lawsuit revealed. His name was Jeffrey Epstein, a financier, a man with access to presidents, princes, and the world's richest people. But according to a civil complaint filed by the government of the U.S. Virgin Islands, Epstein used one property, Little St. James, as a hidden base of operations. The lawsuit describes the island as nearly 2 miles from St. Thomas, reachable only by boat or helicopter, isolated, controlled, almost impossible to reach unless you were invited. And according to that same lawsuit, the isolation wasn't an accident. Prosecutors allege it was the mechanism. The island's remoteness is what let the abuse continue, hidden from outside eyes, for years. The Virgin Islands complaint goes further. It alleges that Epstein trafficked and sexually abused girls and women on that island. And it claims this wasn't a short-lived operation. The government's case alleges the abuse continued up until 2018, years after Epstein had already once faced the law, which raises the question this video is going to answer. If a government lawsuit alleges this went on for that long, on an island that visible, tied to a man that connected, how did no one stop it sooner? And it wasn't just about one man and one island. In separate lawsuits, banks and institutions that critics say enabled him for years have also been taken to court. This is what the Virgin Islands case says happened, and this is where the story really begins. In July 2019, it happened again. Epstein was arrested, this time on federal trafficking charges, this time with the world watching. Cameras outside the courthouse. His name back on every front page, but there was no trial. A month later, Epstein was dead, found in his cell before a jury ever heard the case. No verdict. No conviction on what happened on that island. Just silence where an answer should have been. So the fight didn't end in a courtroom with a judge reading a verdict. It moved somewhere else into civil court, where the U.S. Virgin Islands filed a lawsuit against his estate. Not a criminal case, a claim, an allegation laid out in legal language aimed at everything Epstein left behind. That's the lawsuit this video is built on. Little St. James sits about 2 miles off St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands, a small American territory most people couldn't find on a map. 70 acres, that's it. You could walk the entire island in under 15 minutes. Picture a golf course. Now shrink it. That's roughly the footprint we're talking about, not a landmass, a compound. Small enough to control completely. Small enough that nothing happened on it by accident. And that's what makes the next part land so hard. Locals had a name for it long before the lawsuits. Paradise, turquoise water, palm trees, a private dock. The kind of place that ends up in a travel magazine, not a court filing. Epstein leaned into that image, donations, connections, a reputation as a brilliant, generous financier. Paradise, that was the brand. Here's what the civil complaint calls it instead. Trafficking alleged, abuse alleged, concealment alleged, same island. 2 completely different words for it. Epstein bought Little St. James in 1998. At the time, it was just an undeveloped island, no compound, no infrastructure, nothing. Over the next decade, he built it into something else entirely. Private residences, a pool, a system for keeping the place isolated from anyone who wasn't invited. Then in 2008 came the first legal reckoning. A plea deal so lenient it later drew criticism from federal prosecutors themselves. He served 13 months. Work release most days. And according to the Virgin Islands complaint, the island kept running the same way it always had. The plea deal didn't end anything. It just bought time. After Epstein died, someone still had to answer for the island, because an estate doesn't disappear when a person does. Control passed to his executors, the people now legally responsible for what's left of his fortune, his properties, his name. On the other side stood the government of the U.S. Virgin Islands, whose Attorney General's office filed the civil complaint that built this entire case. That's the structure you need to understand before we go further. Not a criminal court weighing guilt or innocence, but a government suing an estate, trying to hold what's left of Epstein accountable for what the island allegedly hid for years. Here's the first rule the complaint lays out. Isolation isn't just geography, it's a mechanism. Cut off a place from casual visitors, no ferry, no public dock, nothing but a private boat or a helicopter, and you don't just get privacy. You get control over who sees what. The lawsuit alleges that's exactly what the island's remoteness did. It didn't just keep tourists away. According to the complaint, it kept witnesses away too. Rule number 2, allegation is not conviction. Say that twice because it matters. Everything about the island-specific abuse, the trafficking, the concealment, that's a civil claim. Nobody has been criminally convicted for what allegedly happened on Little St. James itself. That's not a loophole. That's the actual, uncomfortable state of the record. A government believes something happened. A court hasn't ruled on it yet. Both of those things are true at the same time. Rule 3. Money doesn't ask questions on its own. Somebody has to ask them. Banks that handled Epstein's accounts have faced their own lawsuits separate from the Virgin Islands case, accused of ignoring red flags for years. Large, unusual transactions. Warning signs a compliance officer is trained to catch. Critics argue those warnings were missed, or worse, waved through. Some of those cases ended in settlements. Not admissions of guilt, but hundreds of millions of dollars moving as a result. That's not nothing. Now here's the detail that sits at the center of this entire case. The one number that makes everything before it click into place. 2018. Epstein had already been convicted once, already served time, already been branded publicly as a registered sex offender. And according to the Virgin Islands complaint, the abuse on that island didn't stop in 2008. It continued for another decade, 10 years, after the world already knew. But here's where it stops being a story about silence, because eventually, someone did move. The Virgin Islands didn't just write a report or issue a statement. They filed a lawsuit against an estate worth hundreds of millions, against lawyers whose entire job was to make this go away quietly. And the banks didn't just get a stern letter. Some paid out settlements in the hundreds of millions, money that's gone toward compensating victims. None of that undoes what the complaint alleges happened. Nothing does, but it means the silence broke. It means the island's isolation, the thing that was supposed to protect it, didn't protect it forever. Here's the part of this story that isn't about Epstein at all. Isolation only works as protection for as long as nobody with power decides to look. That's true on a private island. It's true in a company. It's true in a family. The moment someone with standing, a government, a regulator, a person willing to file the paperwork, decides silence isn't good enough anymore, the whole structure gets exposed to daylight. That's what this case actually proves. Not that the system is broken beyond repair, that it moves too slowly and far too late, but it does move. If you want to see another place where silence lasted for years before anyone acted, I've got a video on exactly that. Links on screen now.